All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, it's no secret that Big 12 Conference Commissioner Brett Yormark has never met a microphone that he hasn't liked, as he's unafraid and unapologetic in regards to touting his league or his opinion of college football or the business aspect of collegiate athletics altogether. Now, Yormark, to his credit, also understands that now more than ever in college football, it's truly survival of the fittest. And if you don't have a great leadership in place, meaning a conference commission, your league could struggle and could potentially fold. Now, several years ago, Yormark inherited a Big 12 that was set to lose Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, while the wheels had already been put in place by Yormark's predecessor, Bob Bowlesby, to add Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF. But Yormark didn't stop there, as his media and marketing backgrounds have allowed him to understand the importance of markets, and subsequently, he wanted to ensure that his Big 12 would be in as many markets as possible. So, what did he do? Plain and simple, Yormark was laying in the weeds, and you could say whatever you want about it, but he was laying in the weeds for the original Pac-12 to go under, and that allowed his league to take on Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado, which did help strengthen the Big 12 in a variety of sports. And of course, the biggest battle that Yormark must wage now is on the gridiron. But it's not in the traditional sense, as Yormark is not about to put a set of shoulder pads and a helmet on. No, he's simply fighting for survival, not only for his league, but every conference not named the SEC or the Big Ten. The Big Ten and the SEC have been attempting to corner the market in college football, as when you look at both leagues, it's a who's who of blue bloods in college football. And whereas the other conferences are fighting for survival, the SEC and Big Ten sit at the head of the table like two bosses of two mob families who have basically called the truce and are consolidating their power. So we know that the Big Ten and the SEC have control of the college football playoff. And in doing so, they're attempting to expand the postseason from 12 teams to 16 teams. It's going to happen, okay? And of course, in the 16-team tournament, they've been looking at the aspect or idea of both of their leagues getting 4 automatic buys, while Yormark's Big 12 would receive 2 automatic bids, as would the ACC. But there was some dissension in the ranks in the SEC, as everybody wasn't on board with their league getting 4 automatic bids. Now, Yormark knows this. He's no dummy, okay? And he's used it to his advantage, as because not only he, but others around college football want the 5+11 format for the playoffs, which would mean that the top 5 conference champions would receive the automatic bids along with 11 at large bids. Now, the 5+11 would mean that the Big 12 would be losing out in some ways. But I'm here to say that that format, that proposed format, is best for the Big 12 and everybody else who is not down with either the SEC or the Big 10. Now, the 5+11 model, in my opinion, okay, is best for college football because you look at it, the Big 10 and the SEC are both strong enough as it is. They don't need at least 4 automatic bids for this tournament. They don't need these 2 mega leagues. They don't need those free passes. Honestly, if you look at this past NCAA tournament during the spring, we saw the backdoor politics, which allowed the SEC to break the record and get 14 of their 16 schools into the NCAA tournament. I get depth of a conference, yes, but if you're 6 games under 500 in your league, I don't care how strong that your league is, you don't deserve to be in the NCAA tournament. I think people are worried about the SEC or Big Ten, doing some chicanery like that in the playoff. But nonetheless, so far at the Big 12's media days, uh, Yormark has been touting the depth of his league. And in doing so, he's not exactly, telling a fib, and he's not exactly trying to sell water to a whale either. We saw four teams in the Big 12 go 7-2 in conference play last year. Only one of those teams made the playoff. The Big 12 is expected in football to once again have multiple quality teams, but is it going to be enough for them to send multiple teams to the playoff? We got to wait and see. And, shameless plug, but I'm going to be talking about that in a couple of weeks when I talk about my previews for college football for this college football season. But nonetheless, you look at it, even though that the Big 12 and ACC are viewed as power conferences, you've really got a hard time convincing me that the Big 10 and SEC view them as equals. Okay, honestly, I feel like the Big 10 and SEC have thrown the Big 12 and the ACC in the pile with everybody else. Okay, uh, I'm not here to be a Debbie Downer, but I will say this: the Big 12 and the ACC will never be on equal footing with the Big Ten and ACC. And I think it just simply comes down to the football money because it's never going to be the same, especially now with so many blue bloods in the Big Ten, so many blue bloods in the SEC in comparison to the ACC and the Big 12. The money's always going to be absurd. You look at the ACC, pardon me, you look at the Big Ten and the SEC right now, they're basically getting close to $70 million per school. The Big 12 and the ACC, they're getting good money. Don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be the same. And if the Big 12 and the ACC, for an example, were to get up to that $70 million mark per school, at that point, you know that the Big 10 and the SEC are going to be well over raking in $100 million. So for me, I feel like this. I feel that the ACC and the Big 12 must each work on their retention rate. And at this point, I like their chances. We know about Florida State and Clemson looking to get out of the ACC's grants of rights. They did, find a happy median. But at the end of the day, if you're Florida State and Clemson, for an example, where are you going to go if the Big Ten and the SEC don't want you? Okay, you look at the Big 12. It's kind of like the same thing. There's really no other place for these schools to go that are there because it would be a sideways or backwards move for the most part if they went someplace else. But for me, your mark wants respectability for his league. Yormark is going to push to have as many teams from his league make the college football playoff, and rightfully so. That is part of his job as conference commissioner. But nonetheless, I feel like the best thing that Yormark's Big 12 can do, they've got to take care of their business on Saturdays in order to get multiple teams in the playoffs. First things first, they've got to go out there and win the games that they're supposed to win. On top of that, this is about the Big 12. They've got to win the matchups against the other leagues. That's the only way that you're going to go out there and get respectability. And on top of that, you've got to go out there and win those marquee games. So that's what it's going to come down to for the Big 12. They've got to find a way to take care of their business. Some people are going to say, should the Big 12 look to expand again? I'm going to say no, because we're still figuring out this thing for a 16 team cross country Big 12, just like we are 18-team cross country Big 10, the expanded SEC, the expanded ACC. So we don't know how this is going to work out. Also, I really do truly feel the next big dominoes that are going to fall on the college football scene, they revolve around the Pac-12 that is looking to be rebuilt. And of course, they have Texas State now, which they added to their freight, which gives them 8 full-time members. The Memphis aspect for football, the Pac-12 Mountain West mediate that's going on. There's a lot of different factors that I think that are going to trigger, but I think everybody at the top is looking to see when the dust settles how things work out. And another aspect for me that I think a lot of people outside, of the college football scene that are watching are waiting to see, and I know I'm one of these. how going forward is the new Pac-12 going to be viewed? Are they still going to be viewed as a power conference, or are they going to be put in that group of five or group of six? Either one could happen. Honestly, I'm really not sure. So I think a lot of that factors in, but I do think that the Big 12 should stay at 16 right now. We got, like I said, we got to see how this current model works out, and they already have 16 miles of feet. Okay, and at this point, if you're the Big 12, if you were to expand, what would you gain out of it? I feel like at this point, I think the Big 10, SEC, ACC, and Big 12, in my opinion, only are going to expand at this point if they truly have to. And the only way they truly have to is if another league completely falls. Okay. But you look at the Big 12 16 team league, the pros and cons of their league. Like I said last year, they had multiple good teams, but they did not have a dominant one. And I think at the end of the day, that's what hurt them, or that's one of the things uh, that hurt them. I know that, like, they're not doing the preseason poll this year because Arizona State was picked to be one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the Big 12 last year, and they turned out winning it. Um, in my opinion, I don't think the preseason poll hurts the Big 12. I just think, and I said this going in once they expanded, it's the fact that you have 16 teams, yes, but in comparison to the Big Ten, in comparison to the SEC, you don't have a lot of those household brands in your league, and it's not a lot of games. Okay, and this is no disrespect to the Big 12. There's not a lot of games that are going to entice fans. You know it, and again, it's not a slight, but you look at the SEC with their league, okay, you can see a Georgia versus Texas. You can see an Alabama versus LSU. You can see Texas A&M, Texas. Okay, games like that are going to have eyeballs on them. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, USC, Oregon, Michigan. And I can go right down the list. And don't get me wrong, both the Big Ten and SEC do have some clunkers in their respective leagues that nobody's going to pay attention to. And there are certain teams in both of those leagues that are never going to have a shot, okay, at getting to the college football playoff. But nonetheless, it's just the perception of each league. And this is the way that some people just simply perceive the Big 12. And like I said before, that's why they've got to go out there and take care of their business on Saturdays. Like I said, they didn't have a dominant team last year. They're going to have some darn good teams this year. Okay. And like I said, I'm going to touch more on that as we get closer to the start of the college football season and I give you my conference breakdowns. But I think one thing that hurt the Big 12 overall for multiple years is the fact that it was a league football wise that was carried by Texas and Oklahoma, mainly Oklahoma. Both of those teams uh, have gone. And I'm really not sure right now, at least, if there is going to be one team in the Big 12 that can simply fill that void and is going to dominate. This league is not set up like that. So you look at Yormark's Big 12 and you ask yourself, what's next? Uh, Brett Yormark is not afraid to shoot for the moon. Okay. And he's not, I'm not going to say he's a gambler, but you know what? He's very aggressive in his moves. And like I said before, more than ever in college football right now, it is about survival. I think for him, he's going to keep pushing the competitiveness of his league. He's going to keep pushing, trying to get as many schools from his conference into the college football playoff and trying to get them in those marquee spots. That's what he's doing. That's all he simply can do. You look at it and you ask yourself, is college football simply at the mercy of the Big Ten and the SEC? Well, they're trying, okay, but at the end of the day, uh, I'm not here to say we need more parity, but we need everybody on the same page in college football. I don't think that ever works the way that things are. And I've said it before, and I will say it again. This is why the sport needs themselves a conference commissioner. So at the end of the day, uh, Brett Yormark's mind, Brett Yormark's mouth, Brett Yormark's energy is what college football needs. And the reason why I say this is because he's a guy who's not afraid to speak out against the Big Ten and the SEC trying to rule things. And I know that basically the Big Ten and the SEC, like I said before, they control the shots as far as the college football playoff goes. And it's like everybody's going to have to get in line with them. It's a given. Okay. The proof is in the pudding already. But nonetheless, it's at least about equality on the college football aspect. And that's something that Brett Yormark is fighting for. So I think, just to sum it up very quickly, I'm not saying that we need parity, no, but we need everybody on the same page. And one thing I will say, the 5 plus 11 format, I think once they go to a 16 team playoff, is going to be better. Give the top five highest rated conference champions the bids. You put in the next 11 at large bids. Okay. That is something that can definitely work. But like I've said in the past, whenever the powers that be agree on a format, once certain parameters work out, there's always going to be somebody fussing. When we had the BCS, there was a possibility of two SEC teams getting into the championship game. When that happened, people complained. With the 14 format, there was a possibility of Notre Dame getting in and taking a spot away, of a group of five member getting in and taking a spot away. That happened with Cincinnati, who was in the American at the time. There was a possibility of multiple SEC teams getting in. We saw Georgia and Alabama get there multiple times together. Okay. So at the end of the day, we have to get everybody on the same page. But I think nonetheless, Brett Yormark understands the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the SEC and the Big Ten cannot just simply shun everybody to the side. Uh, will people listen to what Yormark is selling? I think they will because he knows what he's talking about. I think the 5 plus 11 format for the playoff for the college football playoff will work. I truly do believe that the college football playoff should not be the exclusive province of both the Big Ten and the SEC. The bottom line is their teams have to earn it. You can't just sit up there and get a bid just because I play in this league. You've got to go out there and win your games. I know that certain leagues might be a little bit harder than others, but at the end of the day, um, you know what? It's one of those where you still got to take care of your business on Saturday afternoons. Killer Demo, what's going on? I love that San Francisco Giants background. You're saying the Pac-12 has to get that fifth bid. I am very excited to see how the new Pac-12 works out. Also, I am also excited when it comes to the Pac-12 because I want to see uh, what happens because I really truly do feel from both a basketball and football aspect, I don't think that the Pac-12 is done. I truly don't. I think they're looking for more. And I truly do think the Pac-12 is trying to leverage themselves as much as possible. And that's the name of the game right now. Just like I said at the start of this, it's all about leverage and it's all about survival. You're saying Pac-12 has to get 10 million per team. Anything less is not a good look. I think that's going to happen. I truly do, and I think they're going to get more than that because we've already seen how much that they're going to get from CBS alone. All right. We haven't even factored in the other media partners uh, that they are looking at bringing in. Okay. I think Turner can be a possibility. We know that the CW is going to be there. ESPN is probably going to be in that as well. And that's the other aspect of the conference commissioner right now in today's collegiate landscape. It's not just about getting the money for your league. It's also about getting as much money for your league from different streams, from different parameters. We're seeing that through streaming. We're seeing that through multiple television partners, and that's the big thing. So, from that aspect, I think they're going to be okay with this. You're saying maybe the Pac-12 enterprise building in San Ramon helps out a lot. Listen, absolutely. I've said this before, and I'll say it again about the Pac-12. For the first time in a long time, they've got an adult in the room and Teresa Gold. If they had her leadership in place, the original Pac-12 probably doesn't fold. Okay. If you had a Brett Yormark in place, for an example, 15 years ago, the Pac-12 is probably the Pac-16 right now because they probably would have brought Texas and Oklahoma and a couple of others on board from the Big 12, which was on life support at the time, and they would still be going strong. But nonetheless, that is clearly not the case. But again, you need strong leadership. The Pac-12 has that, in my opinion, now in Teresa Gold. The Big 12 definitely has that in Brett Yormark. Like I said before, he understands the aspect of having, getting the networks behind you as much as possible, getting the media markets behind you as much as possible, and putting your product out there front and center as much as possible. He understands that. I think the biggest uphill battle for him, he just simply doesn't have the brands behind him like a Big Ten or an SEC. It's one of those, again, like I said before, Big Ten and SEC is kind of like a who's who at the table as far as blue bloods in the sport of college football. You're saying I underestimate the snobbiness of Stanford and Cal. That would never associate with Fresno or Boise. Listen, you're 100% right. Maybe not about but about the underestimating it, but I'll tell you like this: the Pac-12, the original Pac-12, for the longest time, needed to expand. They didn't want to. They looked at schools like a Boise State, for an example, which would have clearly helped their football aspect. They looked at them for not having a strong academia, if you will. Um, the Pac-12 has always looked, the original Pac-12. They looked down on the Fresnos and the San Diego States as well. Okay, and at the end of the day, I think it cost them. I mean, just throwing it out there. If you were the original Pac-12, if you had brought in a Boise from probably like 12, 13 years ago, and another big player in the West or Southwest region, where would this league be right now? And I think it cost Stanford, it cost Cal. And my other thing is this: it's like my personal opinion, okay, and my personal opinion is not going to change anything that has happened, and has transpired. I feel like Stanford and Cal should have stayed and worked with Oregon State and Washington State on this. But I told at the same time, I understand uh, they were worried about money and they were also worried about their Olympic sports. I totally get it. I totally understand that. And, they were desperate, which is why they ended up joining the ACC. Um, but even though they're not getting a full cut from the ACC anytime soon, and the same could be said for Oregon and Washington. Okay, it comes down to money, and that's the biggest reason why we're seeing all of this realignment, and that's the biggest reason why we're going to continue to see realignment due to college football because everybody's not on equal footing, and schools are always going to look to get into the leagues where they feel that they can get a bigger slice of the pie. $40 million per year per school is great, but if you have an opportunity to go out there and get into a league where you can get 65 or 70 million dollars per school, more often than not, school presidents and school administrators, they're always going to jump at that. And that's just the nature of it. But again, like I said before, in my opinion, Stanford and Cal should have stayed on the West Coast, and I think sooner rather than later, it's going to hurt them. We've got to sit back and see how, for the next couple of years, how this cross country stuff for some of these conferences is going to work. I feel like, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, for some of these schools who have chased the dollar in football, it always hasn't worked out. Look at Miami as an example. Miami was a national powerhouse in the Big East. They're still fighting to get back to that status. Syracuse and Pitt, for an example, they don't have the basketball presence like they did since going to the SEC. There's a lot of other examples of that. That's just my 2 cents on it. But nonetheless, like I said before, you've got to have strong leadership at the top, and you've got to find a way to keep everybody happy, which is easier said than done. You're saying Catholics versus convicts, great 30 for 30 on the U. Listen, I'm old enough to remember that game when it happened. The last Notre Dame, I might not look it, but I do remember that game when Notre Dame and hosted Miami. That game was on CBS, and of course the infamous Cleveland Gary play. But yeah, that was a great one right there. Now, Killer Demo, I'll say it like this, man. Your crown for the king in purple. Are you a Sacramento Kings fan as well? If so, just drop something in the comments box for me. I'm just a little bit curious on that one. But yeah, nonetheless, man, I think getting back to what I was saying with Brett Yormark, I think he understands the need for exposure for his league. He understands the need for stability, and like I said, you've got to have that strong leadership going all the way around. Okay, San Francisco Giants, Raiders, Fresno State, Fresno State alumni. Okay, and Sacramento Kings. So as far as the Fresno State alumni goes, you know, not asking you your age, but do you go back to the days when Pat Hill was coaching football at Fresno State? The reason why I bring this up is because I remember when Pat Hill coached Fresno, basically his motto was, we'll play anybody, anywhere, anytime. And there were always schools, some of the bigger schools, that were afraid to go to the Valley and take on his Bulldogs. Very competitive teams, very tough teams, and I don't think a guy like Pat Hill, in my opinion, got enough credit for what he did for the bulk of his tenure at Fresno State. I hope that Fresno State can get back to that, and I really want to see what they look like in the new Pac-12. That's just my thoughts. But yeah, listen, I think that the Pac-12 is going to have an impact. They're going to have some type of say on how things go forward. And like I said, I'm just interested to see how they are viewed. Also, you know, Brett Yormark makes a point. I truly think the 5+11 format works much better for college football than what what the SEC and the Big Ten were trying to pull off. You're saying you're only 38. That was mid 2000s. Pat Hill is still close to the program. Calls games on the radio. Yeah, listen, I remember him from my college days and like my post college days and even pre college days, for that much. And I remember some of his good teams, of course, with David Carr. I don't think, because simply, unfortunately for David Carr, didn't work out like a lot of people were expecting it to for him in the NFL. But David Carr was a darn good college quarterback. And of course, that goes back to the days when Fresno still played in the WAC. Okay, so old school college football fans will remember the WAC conference as being a good conference, but unfortunately, the WAC, like others, unfortunately, fell by the wayside, if you will, with collegiate athletics. But nonetheless, Big 12, I think they were in good hands, in regards to leadership. And real quick to your point about David Carr, yeah, starting a rookie quarterback behind an expansion offensive line with an expansion team was a recipe for disaster. But nonetheless, Big 12 leadership, I think, is strong. It's in place, and I think Brett Yormark has done a solid job being front and center for his league. I truly hope that if they're going to expand this thing, that it's all about that 5+11 format. I think as long as it's something that doesn't lean towards one conference or two conferences. And I think everybody simply needs to go out there and earn it. Just my thoughts on it. But nonetheless, fine folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, appreciate you checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, everybody, if you like what you heard and if you like what you saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Killer Demo, appreciate you chiming in. And I will say this to you and anybody else who checks this out. August is right around the corner. Before you blink, we're going to have the start of a new college football season. I've got a lot to talk about on this channel. So definitely stay tuned. Hit that alert button so this way you can catch up when I do drop some new stuff because I've got my top 25 for the upcoming season. I'll be coming out with that in about the next 2.5 to 3 weeks, which is going to be followed by a conference by conference breakdown for the upcoming college football season, as well as I'm also going to give you my projections for the upcoming college football playoffs. So you definitely want to stay in tune and definitely check that out. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 pounds of sports. And like I always say, if you give me that follow, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. You could also do the same on Instagram, and you can check us out at 300 pounds of sports knowledge. And like I said, give me the follow, I'll give you that follow right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365, and you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.